I'm here with Nayia Perrakos. Sorry, I tried to roll my R's. Nayia,
Yeah,
really great to have
you do great.
Well, quick shout out to our mutual friend, Nick Lamagna, for introducing us. He's a fellow real estate investor and podcaster. So really great to talk to you. We're such kindred spirits. We were just talking before we started recording. You're from Sparta. And of course, most people listening to this know about the legendary warriors from Sparta from the movie 300. And you were talking about when you first came to the US. So I'd love to start there if we could, because it was so tough. You came as a teenager, different country, different language. You didn't speak English too great. So can we start there?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, I came to the US when I was 11 years old. I just turned 11. And I started sixth grade. So imagine not being able to speak any English. And the first day of school, I'm going to tell you a funny story so you can picture this. So it's first day of school, the bell rings, and I'm the only one in the hallway, okay? Because everybody has gone into classes. And all of a sudden, I don't know where to go. And I see this adult, male come towards me, happens to be like the principal or vice principal of the school. And as soon as he started, talking to me, I just started bawling. My first reaction was like a breakdown. And I had nothing. I didn't know what to say besides no speak English. And I'm pointing at a piece of paper that I had, my class schedule, and I didn't even know where to go, what class to go to. And I just remember that first day, like so vividly, because it was like traumatic.
For every adult wants to be unique and different, but every kid just wants to be as average, fit in with everyone around them. So it's such a balance as a parent, because you're a parent now with your 3 boys, and it's just it's such a. I'm already thinking ahead. My son's about to turn 3, but you're thinking you just want him to have this, like you said, not a traumatic upbringing. You want a nice, loving upbringing, but sometimes in order to be special, you do have to go through the fire, and you have to go through these traumatic events. So it's, as a parent, it's such a balance between how much do you want to shield your child from things, and then how much do you want him to just be forced to struggle and figure it out, because that's going to really set him up well for life.
That's true. And we do have a tendency to want to shield our kids. I've done it too. I have 3 teenage boys. But what my mom did, the Spartan warrior mindset, my mom was just very tough. I have 3 siblings, and we're all a year apart. I'm the oldest of 4, and I was her right hand since I was little. And it was her strong Spartan mindset that helped us survive and thrive in the new country.
Yeah, I'm sure that must have been at the time tough, but it set you up in good stead for life, because I actually just heard this a couple of days ago. I was just thinking about it before we started talking. It was somebody talking about, I think it was maybe the Maasai tribe in Africa, or it was some kind of tribal culture where they said by 10, 11 years old, the boys were treated almost like men. They had all these responsibilities. And then he was saying, kind of compare that to the West. You have these people in their mid-20s that still live at home. They're not doing anything with their lives. They're being supported by their parents. They have no responsibilities. And they're just like, what is going on with society? That was kind of his take. And, I don't have the answers. These are all these, it's so interesting, because you've been a parent a long time, Nayia. And we are going to talk about real estate, but I'm always so fascinated with people like you to pick your brain, because I'm a new parent. And just how much the things that I think about have changed the last few years, because I'm trying to think about these decisions I make. So, which state do I live in? So I just moved from Chicago, which is in Illinois, to Indiana, and it has a completely different school system. And then I've got other friends that are like, no, I'm doing homeschooling. And then, no, I'm doing this. I'm going to bring my kids to this English school, because I'm from an English background. And all these things you're just trying to figure out, and no one has the answers. It's just like this, you're thrown in as a new parent, like, make these decisions, and they're going to completely impact my kid's future. And I have no idea, what the right answer is.
So you know what? A couple of weeks ago, I'm in a mastermind, and I listened to a couple who's been married for over 30 years, and they have their kids in their 20s. And they were discussing about the similar issue. And they said, as parents, we always worry, are we doing things right? Because we want to are we doing things right? and we're wondering, are we messing our kids up? Our mistakes, and we're comparing who's, oh, that family looks like they're doing things better than we are. But at the end of the day, we're falling into the comparison trap and comparing someone's front stage with our backstage. At the end of the day, everybody has a backstage. And I don't believe that there's only one way to go, as long as there's no book that we can get. This is the best way to raise your kids, because we all have different values, different cultural backgrounds. You and I are immigrants, so that changes us. Bringing certain traditions and cultures here with our kids, it changes our home life, right? So I would say you're doing the best you can. And you will never stop questioning if you're doing things right. That's it.
Yeah.
It's our human nature. Could you be doing things a little better? Absolutely. But based on your time, your flexibility, thank God we're in real estate and we have more flexibility, right?
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
Because I was a staying-at-home mom. I started my first business, at 23. And then when I started having kids, I decided to stay home, for a couple of years. And then when the market crashed in 2009, my whole world changed. I'm like, how can I help my family out? Because my husband at the time got laid off. And I felt like, real estate is the only solution I have, because I had gotten my real estate license in 2004. And I said, I need flexibility because I can't afford daycare. Imagine that. Imagine, having a college degree, I have a marketing management degree. And then you're like, when you have 2 or 3 kids that are under 5, can you afford $2,000 per kid per month in daycare?
Crazy expensive.
It's crazy expensive. So I was like, okay, well, I'll do real estate because I could stay at home and I could go on appointments in the evenings, on the weekends. I can figure things out.
Yeah, that's one huge advantage we have now, is the flexibility of real estate. And I will say, it seems like the world is kind of moving to a more flexible schedule for people. So I teach and train jiu-jitsu, and most of the time is that their classes are at noon in downtown Chicago. And I'm always blown away at the amount of people, and that, there'll be 20, 25 people sometimes. And you're like, man, all these people have flexible jobs, whether it's taking a long lunch break, whether it's just, kind of choosing your own hours, whether it's working remotely, and people don't care as long as you get the work done. So I think that's just a great change in society we've noticed, where people realize that you don't have to be on that kind of strict 9-to-5 schedule as long as you're getting the work done. And we're just lucky in real estate that we do tend to have, like you said, weird hours, where a lot of time we're doing showings the weekends, showings in the evenings. We're a lot more flexible. So how long did it take when you were this, crying on your first day of school, completely overwhelmed, culture shock, new place? How long did it take to feel assimilated in US culture? Was it pretty quick? Was it many years? How was that?
So, interestingly enough, it was a year.
1 year.
Within a year, I picked up the language. And by the time I was in 8th grade, so like 2 years later, so what's funny, my first year, 6th grade, I got no grades in any classes. I just got N, like no A, B, C, D, except math. I was better in math, than my American, kids in my class, just because in Greece, I was just I was more advanced.
Right.
So my math class was the only class that I felt confident in, that I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I don't need to read instructions. It's numbers. I can figure this out. But within a year, I was able to get regular grades. And then I even switched from ESL, like English as a second language. And I was acclimated to the American culture and the school system.
That's incredible. It just goes to show that when you're thrown in as a kid, you really do adapt quickly. And I feel that's when people say you have to learn languages. The only real way to learn a language is just to move to a country that speaks that language and just go all in, where you're forced to adapt. You have to.
You have to. Yeah. The kids are resilient. Like the things that absolutely. I agree 100%.
So you said you started your first company when you were just 23 years old. Was that anything to do with real estate, or was that something completely separate?
No. So I say that, we all go through challenges and how we see them. So I was lucky enough to get laid off at 23. So it was my first year out of college. I was the youngest business development manager for an IT consulting firm, okay, in the early 2000s. And the company was growing. And because I was the youngest business development manager, I didn't have a book of accounts. So they needed technically more desk space. So they brought in another, higher level account manager that brought a book of business to the firm. So I was laid off. And that pushed me, along with my mom, the Spartan mindset, right? My mom's help got me into the retail industry, and I started having those little kiosks that you see at malls and airports. So within a couple of years, so I'm 23, 24, and I'm having a couple of locations. I had 6 to 8 locations at a time. Here I'm in the DC metro area, so local malls and airports. And I was doing fantastic, making 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, in my mid-20s.
Wow.
And it was through that experience that I said, okay, what am I going to do with this money? I need to start investing. And that's how I got into real estate.
So let's take a couple of steps back. How did you grow so quickly at that age? Because that's incredible.
I think my mom has been like a business owner, like an entrepreneur since her 17, 18. So when she first came to the US, she was 16 years old in New York City, and she bought her first beauty salon at 18 on Broadway in New York. So she had that entrepreneurial mindset, right?
Yeah.
So when we came here and getting laid off, she said, it's time to get on your feet. I'm going to help you start your first business. And she gave me the first investment to buy my material that I needed. And it was history from there. This is the thing. I love the retail industry because it's margins. I would buy a pair of, let's say I was selling sunglasses, designer sunglasses, for $2 to $5, and I would sell them, for 12 to 15. So my profit margins were huge. So once I started seeing that, I was like, well, I want to grow. I want to open another location locally, in another location, in another location. So that's how that happened.
So when you had multiple locations, were you relying on people to manage them?
Yes. So I started hiring. Yes, I had some college students. I even had adults that were double my age, working for me. And initially I had my 2 brothers helping me too. So every location had its own manager, had a couple of people working, I would do inventory. So I'd learned, from, making mistakes. I learned by just doing it, being thrown in it.
So for me, I've never worked in that kind of business, but I would think the hardest thing is just like your brothers, that's family, I understand. But the other people you're hiring, it's such a crapshoot because, no one works as hard as an employee than they do as a business owner. So you're kind of relying on them. You're not there. They're managing a different location. Was that tough? Did you just get lucky with good people? How was that?
Oh, yeah. I did get lucky with some people and not so lucky with other people. That's where I started learning, different personality types. And some people were driven and others not so much. And I would go and check on them and they wouldn't even be in the location. They would be off doing something else. So I started realizing, that's why my sales are down. That's why this person is not producing the same way I'm producing. Right. Yeah. So let me cut their hours and let me see who I can replace. It won't be me 100%, but how can I multiply myself? Exactly. And then I was lucky enough throughout the years that I did find I had a couple of people who saw the business as if it was theirs. And I was like, oh my God, I trust them completely.
That's incredible.
So there are good people out there.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing for entrepreneurs is trying to, anytime you're looking to expand, or even if, if things like, you have a new child at home, you can't work the hours you used to have when you were single. It's just trying to trust people. And like you said, it's going to happen. Some people are going to be better than others. It's going to be a bit of a process to find the right people. That's something that I've been working on a lot the last few years. And actually was having a conversation with one of my best friends yesterday. And he was like, you seem like you've enjoyed this summer a lot more in Chicago than usual. And I said, yeah, I've been really lucky with the guys I work with. I've been just letting go of me trying to do everything, letting go of the feeling in real estate. And I'm sure you know this too, where people want you. And it's almost like, even if they don't say anything, I have that feeling like, oh, they want me. So I feel bad if I say, hey, you're going to meet my partner, Jason. He's going to meet you here. Good luck. So it's that you have to just let those feelings go. And you know what? If people are that difficult in real estate where they're going to not work with you because you're not going to be there for every showing, I don't want to work with them myself, So it's just trying to find that balance as an entrepreneur, the ability to let go. And that's been very challenging for me. And I'm glad to say that this summer, I feel like I'm finally getting the right balance.
That's awesome. I love that. And you're absolutely right. We have to remind ourselves because remind ourselves that we can trust. And sometimes when we let go, actually not sometimes, it's been my experience that every time I let go and I have a feeling of trust and I allow things to just happen, it's like magic almost. Like the right individuals will show up. Things happen without me having to force so much. All by myself. And then I'm like, oh, look at that. Look how that just finished. Look at that project, getting completed. Look how that person stepped up to help me out. What a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, and
getting out of our way.
Well, there's something I've noticed as well. There was times when I was younger and more aggressive where I try and reply to everything straight away and every emails that are coming in. And then I noticed that there'll be times where I'm tied up for a few hours and then I'll get back to my laptop and I'll see that all these people are emailing me. And then a lot of them are kind of figuring things out themselves. And it's like, they're like, oh, no worries. I figured it out. And you can almost, and I know productivity coaches have talked about this. You definitely can needlessly overwork with that mentality where I'm trying to get that inbox to zero, where I'm trying to reply to everything straight away. And you'll go through your whole life like that and you'll never get it done because they'll always keep coming. And that's something that like you said, kind of letting go. When I was young, I just saw the world as malleable to my will. So I said, I'm going to try to bend the world to my will to get my goals, as opposed to now I realize that life's going to happen. You can't always bend it to your will. You have to be a bit more adaptable and flexible and let things happen. And that's kind of what you were just saying, where things do work themselves out. You don't have to architect every single thing in your life, to try and make it perfect. And that's something that I kind of, again, with letting go, it's really not only helped me with my life, but helped me with my happiness, my stress levels, everything. It's just, be a bit more willing.
You know what it is? Yes, it's letting go of control.
Yes.
It's all about control, because we all want to control certain things, situations, circumstances, even people. And I realized that, years ago, I went to a Tony Robbins event, and so many people have a misconception that control is a good thing. At the end of the day, we have no control besides controlling ourselves. Okay. The words that come out of our mouths, or even the thoughts that we're having, so we can sift them if they're not helping us in some way. We really have no control. So when we realize that, then you're like, okay, I'm going to step back and I want to live. Okay. I don't want to have a heart attack before you're 50.
Yeah. And I'll say, Nayia, the best blessing that I think my son has given me is an appreciation for time. Like you said, I think maybe before we started recording, you said, enjoy it, because before you know it, he'll be a teenager like my boys. It goes so quickly. And before him, I didn't appreciate time. So I'd be 37, 39, 40. The years kind of bleed into each other. And yeah, time's going by, but I didn't really notice it. And now when you see a little guy where every month he's developing, he's changing, you're like, man, I'll never get that month back. So I have to appreciate it while I have it. So it's just given me a much more appreciation of time. And then once you start appreciating your time, you're not just going to, overwork yourself. It gives you much more better work-life balance. Because I think the struggle for every entrepreneur, and especially people that work in real estate, is you can lose a bit of that sense of work-life balance, and you can work too much. And ultimately, I don't know about you, Nayia, but for me, money represents freedom, and I love what I do and I want to make money, but not at the expense of giving up all my time. So it's that constant balance for how much do you want to work to make money to get freedom, because you're also giving your time for that freedom.
Absolutely, 100%. I have been so lucky that I have been home like every day when my kids get home, right? So my oldest is in college right now, and my other two are in high school. And to say that as a parent, yes, I work from home, I do things like that, but like you said, that flexibility and being around, not missing, any concerts, any sports events, anything like that is a big deal. One advice I have for you is, one of my friends wrote a book. Do you know who Jim Seals is?
No.
He wrote a book, 18 Summers.
Okay.
I met him a couple of years ago, and he said, and it hit me profoundly. He said, as a parent, all you have is 18 summers before your kids go off, become adults, and then they won't be spending much time with you. So when I realized that, you're like, wow. Yeah, yes, you have the whole year, right? 18 years, but 18 summers to do something so memorable. Because when they're in school, life happens and everybody's busy running around. But if you break it down to a simple time, you said that you had one of your best summers this summer.
Yes.
Right? So imagine, planning for these summers with your son that are going to be so memorable for you and for him and your wife, your whole family, right? If you have more kids, even more so. But it's not that much, right? 18 summers will go by really quick.
That's great advice. Yes, that idea of starting with the end in mind. So like a lot of people, if you not to be morbid or anything, but say you're going to live to your 80s, and then you work out, well, I don't have too long left. So it's that mind. It's I know in Ryan Holiday and the Stoics talk a lot about this, where they're very appreciative that time is just so short. And then by putting it down to, like, well, you just said 18 summers. He's already 3, so I've only got 15 left. That's nothing. 15 summers. That's absolutely nothing. It just gives you so much for appreciation. And I think I think it was the Greek gods that the Greek gods that were jealous of humans because we were mortal, and because being mortal, everything just had much more richness. Whereas when you're immortal, you have all the time in the world. Nothing really matters. I'll get to it next year. You've got all this time. But being a mortal being, it makes everything, a beautiful dinner with someone you love is so special, because you know that you don't have endless dinners. A perfect summer is, like you said, one of 18. That's all you're going to get. It just makes everything, for me at least, just much more special. So I really love that. I'm definitely going to read that book, and I love that metaphor. But now let's go back. So you said you were this young woman making all this money, which is crazy because most people don't get to experience that. And then you had to figure out what you're going to do with it. So did someone recommend investing in real estate, or how did real estate come up?
Yeah, I met a real estate agent locally, and he said, why don't you get your license? So while I still had my business, I got my real estate license, and just so I could learn the market here in the DC metro area. And then I could learn to pick certain areas that I could buy investment properties in that can cash flow. So I went the traditional route, where I would put 20% down, buy an investment property, put a tenant in there, and get a couple of investment properties that way to start building my portfolio. What I do now is totally different.
Yeah, you do very creative financing.
Yeah. Right now it's leverage. It's all about, Do you know that I have not gotten a loan from a bank in over 10 years?
That's incredible.
Because I solve the seller's problem, and I buy houses creatively. And most of the time, if a house has a loan on it, I use the existing loan and I buy it subject to the existing loan.
So can you explain how that works? So how can you buy an existing loan? Because the loans transfer, as far as I'm aware, only certain loans transfer.
So that's a very good question. So in 1976, first of all, let me go back. In the 1980s, when the interest rates were really high, okay, 12, 15%, sellers had a really hard time selling their properties. And what they used to do is sell them on seller financing or subject to the existing loans, or the new buyer would take over their loan, right? Mm-hmm. Now, banks got together because they realized we're not making money. They're doing this, okay? So that's when the due on sell clause came about, and all loans nowadays have a due on sell clause that says if the lender finds out that there was a deed transfer, okay, they have a right to call due the loan. Hmm. Now, let me tell you this. Let me ask you, do you think a bank cares who makes their mortgage payment every month? Whether you make your mortgage payment to your house or if I make your mortgage payment, do they care who makes the payment?
No, as long as they get it.
Exactly. So this is not a new strategy, okay? But when I first learned how to do this over 10 years ago, I felt like I won the lottery. I was like, oh my gosh, I can solve the seller's problem. I can take over their existing loan, okay? So it's a normal deed transfer. But let me tell you this, Lawrence, it's not a formal assumption. I won't call Bank of America or Chase Mortgage and say, oh, can you please qualify me to make sure that I can make the payments? It's not like that. I buy all my houses with an attorney or a title company. There's a deed transfer, but the loan stays in place. So the lien is on the property. There's just an ownership transfer. And instead of, Mike and Susie Smith making the mortgage payment, it's my company making the mortgage payment. Now, the loan still shows up on Mike and Susie Smith credit report, right? It still shows up on their credit report, but they don't care because Nayia is making the payments every month. And I have ways to go about to solve their problem if they needed to buy another house, for instance, or if they needed to, so it won't count against their debt to income ratio. Does that make sense?
That was my next question. Yeah. Because if they're still showing as paying the loan and they want to buy another property, how would they get their loan to buy another property?
Good question. So what I do is you're in real estate, you're an agent. So you know that if your client has an investment property and they have a tenant there, that makes the mortgage payment. When they go to a loan officer, the loan officer will see that there's a lease and there's a tenant making the payment, right? Yeah. So the loan officer won't count that property against their debt to income ratio. So it's very similar. They contact me and my company will they'll give them a transaction history report. So they can give that report to their loan officer, showing that they're not the ones making the mortgage payment. It looks almost as if it's an investment, if it's a rental. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, 100%. So according to the bank, in the bank size, for the new loan, it does look like they've just rented the property instead of selling it almost, because the payments are covered by you.
Correct. Now, it's to my advantage to, are there investors out there who could mess up somebody's credit? Absolutely. This comes down to trust. And to tell you that I have bought properties like this, even from a retired CIA agent and a former federal judge. I structured a creative deal like this, and I took over an existing loan. He had a lot of equity, like $300,000. I worked terms with, I brought 50K to the table. I worked terms, let me put it that way, so I don't go into the detail and overcomplicate things. But when you're a credible individual, right, and and you educate the sellers, all people care about is moving on with their life, because they have life situations, whether it's a job relocation, or if it's divorce, or if there's a death, if they're downsizing because their kids are off to college, or they're growing their family because they're having more kids, right? These are all real life situations that people have. And if I can solve their problem in a matter of 2 weeks versus months, okay, don't look at the real estate market, how it was, the last 2 years. It was a seller's market. Things are changing. Even though the market has been the way it has, I have still been buying properties like this.
Okay. What is the advantage? So I'm looking at it from it's incredible what you're saying, and I obviously believe you, but I'm just trying to think how you sell this to the sellers. Meaning, if I was a seller, it would be much easier just to sell it to someone who's going to get a loan, completely pay off my loan, be done, wash my hands of it. Yes, it's going to take a few weeks longer, but what is the advantages for, how can you sell it to them or structure it so that it's worth it for the seller as opposed to just a quicker close? Because it seems like there's more risk and liability for them, and you got to kind of sell a story. So what is the incentive for them?
Good. That's a very good question. A couple of different scenarios. One incentive is if the property needs work and they don't have the money to put in to fix it up, okay, then the incentive is I'm going to do all the work, okay? Mm-hmm. They can move on. They don't have to deal with the property. What if this individual, let me ask you this. So this is one scenario, if the property needs work. Another scenario is if this individual is in the middle of buying another house, or if they have a job relocation and they can't afford 2 mortgages, okay, I can just solve their problem immediately. So do you see how I just solved 2 different situations? Another situation can be where the real estate market is slowing down. It's in the fall and winter months. You and I have been around long enough where we know that when schools start, the real estate market slows down. So one of my best buying seasons are, from September to February, March, because traditionally the real estate market is slow. And when houses sit on the market longer, okay, it's harder to find a buyer.
Right.
And if that person has a situation and they need to move on with their life, they don't want to be paying mortgages on a vacant house, for instance.
No, that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm looking at it from a perspective of somebody doing a traditional 1 month or 6 week closing to you offering 2 weeks. But I'm not. That's if they have another buyer. If they don't have a buyer, like you said, it could sit vacant for 6 months. They're paying the mortgage for 6 months, before they find somebody. So that's definitely a huge thing.
Exactly, it's a huge thing. And the other thing is, I always work around their timeline. Most of the time, they do want a month because so they can, pack their house up and they can move on with their life, wherever they're going. They don't want to be rushed. But sometimes if they have a vacant house, can I close in 10 days or 2 weeks? Yes. Mm-hmm. This is another thing. People who are in foreclosure or about to get to foreclosure, do you know that I can help them? You know how?
No.
I can reinstate their loan. Okay, I can reinstate their loan. Obviously, it's numbers, so the numbers have to work, right? But I could reinstate the loan to make it current, help them build their credit back up again, and save them from going to foreclosure. And if there's enough equity in their property, I can even pay them for their equity. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
There's so much opportunity by having this in your toolbox.
So now, traditionally, you said when you first started investing in real estate, you're putting 20%. Most investors put between 20 and 25%. That's kind of industry standard. When you're doing this creative owner financing, typically, are you putting the same amount down, or do you put sometimes less, or how does that work?
Okay. You said you believe me up until this point, right? Yes. You can even have people pay you to buy their house. Okay. It's all numbers. Yeah. So I don't put 20% down. I don't put more than that, because let me tell you some of my parameters so you have an understanding of when I look at a property, this is how I analyze it. So the most I pay for a property, if it meets my buying criteria as far as location, area, is up to 90% of the fair market value. The reason being, right, and I explain this to the sellers, say, okay, we don't have to use real estate agents, right? I can buy it straight from you. So by reducing the 6% commission, okay, and then I will pay closing costs for them, right? Another, 2 to 4%. So they would be netting around 90% anyways.
Yeah.
Even traditionally, right? You agree? Yeah. So when I tell them that, okay, the most we can pay is 90%, everybody agrees. When I go to the property and I evaluate the condition of the property, if it needs work, then it's reduced from that 90%. So let me give you an example. I have about 75% of the properties that I buy are prettier houses that don't need a lot of work. Okay. If I give you a scenario of a property that fair market value is $500,000, right?
Yeah.
Because this has happened to me many times. So here in the DC metro area, I bought houses $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. So make the numbers easy. If it's a $500,000 house and they have a loan on it for $450,000, okay, that's 90% of the fair market value, right?
Yeah.
And let's say this is a pretty house and it's 4 years old and it doesn't need anything. I have bought houses where I just took over the loan and I only paid closing costs. I've paid $3,000, $4,000. And now I have a newer house that I can rent out. So let me give you a quick scenario on this example. So my margin, I make $50K already built in, my profit margin, right? Because if I buy a house they have a loan for $450,000 and the fair market is $500,000. Now, what if I put a tenant buyer in there? I put someone in there who wants to buy it in the future, in the next year. So I do a lease with an option to buy. And guess what? My tenant, okay, he has an option price for $525,000.
Yeah.
Right? Because the future, $525,000. And guess what? He's paying the mortgage. He's paying rent. And that rent covers the mortgage and it gets principal balance reduction every month. So every month you're getting principal balance reduction. So in a year or in 18 months, when this buyer is ready to buy the house from me at $525,000, what used to be a $450,000, let's say a $450 loan, the principal balance is like $430,000 or $425,000. I just created $100K profit margin on a pretty house that I didn't really have to do any work on. Does that make sense?
No, it's incredible. Yeah, you're leveraging the power of your knowledge and the power of time, right? Because he needs a quick solution. You can wait 18 months. You find the right tenant, and you create incredible value.
Exactly. And you know what's cool? Everybody's happy. Everybody's happy. The sellers solved their problem like this. They got a fair price because they knew the numbers, right? I did not deal with people who were in desperate positions. I didn't steal their house away from them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So everything went, so they got a fair price. I just leverage. Leverage is one of my favorite words, if not my favorite word in real estate. So, but you can see how you can create wealth for yourself by knowing how to do certain strategies. And for me, helping real estate agents wear the investor hat is what I'm doing. Because real estate agents have great customer service skills. They're the best, at what they're doing. Not all of them, you and I know that. There's the 80-20 rule. But what if they had an investor hat on too and said, you know what, I could list your property, but if the market is slow, what if I buy it from you?
Right. Okay. Couple of things. So in that example you just gave, when you close, say the loan is with Chase, does Chase even know it's been sold, or you just automatically take over the payments?
Good question. I like how you're thinking, because I know your brain is like, how do we go into the date? Okay. So there are certain disclosures that they sign at closing. I get an one of my disclosures is an authorization to contact the lender. So the sellers are giving me authorization. And another one is I get a power of attorney from them. I get a power of attorney where it allows me to sell the house. I get a limited power of attorney for that particular property.
Yeah.
So I explain all this. So they understand the process. Okay. They know what's going on. I don't make promises I can't keep. For example, like if they say, can you tell us exactly when you will have the house sold so we can have it off of our credit? I can say I can't make that promise because there's so many factors. We saw what happened in 2009, 2008. If interest rates go up, okay, so I'm very transparent with them. And I say this, one promise that I do guarantee is I will make your mortgage payment every month. And now, what if I buy a house that has equity and I have to give them a promissory note? What if I owe you $50,000? Okay. And we work out terms, and then I'm going to give you another golden nugget. So for your audience is, even if I buy properties that have equity and I don't bring the equity to the table, you'd be surprised how many people are willing to wait for their equity if they can get their problem solved. Lawrence, it's amazing. Okay. So there's a lot of people that have money and they don't need more money. So I create promissory notes that are 5 years, 60 months. So and I do it for protection service, to protect myself. For instance, if the market, changes, I'm not going to say I'm going to pay you $50K in 12 months, because I want to make sure. I tell everybody this, sellers, I want to stay in business. I'm going to guarantee that I'm going to stay in business and I go out of business. So I'm not about to make improvements to a property or bring money to the table and risk the market dropping.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're not going to make promises. They're going to give you financial trouble, because then you're not going to be able to make the payments, which they're relying on you making the payments. So that makes sense.
And this is the other thing too. People say, well, what would happen if you missed a payment? I'm going to give you what I tell them, which is it's an obstacle, right? I say, you know what? That's a very good question. If I miss a mortgage payment, okay, I will deed the house back to you, along with any improvements that I make to it. Doesn't that reassure them? And I have a ton of testimonials that are notarized from sellers who have bought houses from, okay? So that's another level of reassurance that if I did what I was supposed to do, and if a former federal judge trusted me, why should you trust me?
Yeah. No, listen, I see that you've got a niche, but I'm kind of trying to think for someone that doesn't have the track record that you have. But this idea of solving problems, I'm going to give you a perfect example for people listening, why that's important. I bought a 4-unit building in Chicago with a friend of mine. He's a college friend, and he always had a bit of how can I say this? He had a proclivity to a bit of mental illness issues, but it was always kind of minor. And he was very charming and charismatic. And then during COVID, he had a bit of a breakdown, and he was like, I need the money we basically bought it 50-50. He said, I need the down payment immediately. And I said, well, it's in the middle of COVID. Like, no one is buying anything. We're not going to sell it for a huge loss because, you and I put in 50-50. We own this together. So then suddenly he's starting talking to some attorney that wants to sue me. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, like I've got to sell this. So I kind of just said, well, I don't care. It's not going to be the best price, but things were starting to move a bit. We were kind of, the initial pause in the real estate market from COVID kind of ended. So things were moving. So I was like, I don't care. I don't want to deal with this. Like you said, a lot of people, I just want to be done with this issue with this guy. He's very negative in my life. So I got a buyer, and then the price came in 50,000. The appraisal came in 50,000 under the asking price. So I spoke to the buyer, and they said, listen, it was cash flowing very well. And they said, we'll pay you that 50,000 over 3 years. So I think it worked out to be something like 1250 or 1,300 a month. And we'll just basically use the income from that to pay it. And I was like, done. So I did the exact same thing. I'm about, halfway through that. I'm about 18 months into that 3 years, but exactly the same thing you're saying. It was creative financing that was off the books. The banks didn't even know. I just had to get it sold because I had the problem of this guy who went a bit crazy, and he was like threatening to sue me about an illiquid asset that I couldn't sell during COVID. And that's exactly the kind of thing you're saying is real estate is an incredible vehicle for cash flow, for tax write-offs, for developing wealth over the long term. Probably the best secret among millionaires and billionaires is real estate. But the one huge knock on real estate is it's illiquid. And there's certain times where if you need to sell during bad markets, you're going to get kind of screwed. And that was the perfect example. So I completely see what you're saying, why it's useful. But
let me ask you this, Lawrence. Could you have done something different in that scenario with your partner? Could you say, because instead of you selling it, what if you had kept it, okay, and had your partner make up the difference?
So, well, he wanted, so the money that we put down, we both bought it with traditional 25% financing. So he wanted his equity out, and I didn't have the cash at the time. Yeah. So it was a key issue of, I had to get the lump sum to send to him.
Okay. So you did pull equity out. So there was a loan. Was it paid off or no?
Yeah, no. It wasn't paid off, but we had a lot of equity in there. So I basically sold it, and even with the 50,000 that came later, there was enough to pay all the closing costs and pay him back.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay. So the numbers worked out. Yeah. If you had equity, or if you brought in a private investor for his equity, I mean, there's always ways to keep that asset, especially if it was cash flowing a lot. For me, I always like looking outside of the box.
Well, I was going to say, Nayia, one of the reasons I really like talking to you is because I've done deals just as a broker where I've thought out of the box too. So, for instance, I've got this great client of mine who does a lot of stuff. He's Russian, and he's got a lot of family money in Russia, and I think they're just trying to get it out of the ruble into US dollars. So he'll do things like where he'll suddenly just have a huge amount of cash, and he'll buy a building cash. And he got to the negotiation with a seller, and they were $25,000 apart. And it was for 2 buildings, so I guess 50 total. And then he ended up throwing in a Porsche, a 911, and the seller was a builder, but he's like, hey, I've always wanted a 911. This is great. So like, I remember that was just an example of just trying to do creative financing. He had almost all the cash, and he had this beautiful car, and he was like, listen, I really want the building, so I'll part with the car. But it's just those things where just trying to think outside the box, because in real estate, especially as you get experience, like I've been doing this quite a long time now, it's just a formula. Like without even thinking, you go under contract, you order the inspection, everything is just, you talk to the lender, you get everything is just, you have kind of a formula for it, and you follow the formula. So it's really nice to talk to someone like you, where you say, well, you don't have to follow that formula. You can get creative, and you can make, the most important thing you said is everybody's happy. You're not screwing people over. You're making this a win-win for everybody. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, everybody's happy, and I'm making the most amount of money that I could make. Because imagine if I solved their problems, they still would have, but I only made, $10, $15, $20,000 commission that I would have to split with a broker, right?
Yeah.
So now you created an asset, okay, that you can depreciate tax benefits, right? And you'll make a lot more. You're building wealth, because as a real estate agent, if you stop listing houses, or you stop, driving buyers around, to put offers on properties, what happens? No money comes in.
Yeah, I think real estate is great, but people don't realize that there'll be times where COVID was a great example. When COVID happened, I had millions of dollars under contract. Everything fell through. And we had a few months of just making zero. And you don't plan for that. Like you don't plan for suddenly just having no income coming for months. And it does happen.
Yeah, it happens. So imagine having, a portfolio of 10, 20 properties, if not more, that no matter what happens, they're getting paid. The mortgages are getting paid, principal balances are getting reduced, you're cash flowing. Because you're in Chicago, you're in a good area that you can cash flow on a lot of your properties.
Exactly. I was going to say, in the Midwest, you tend to get some of the best returns in the country. So I deal with a lot of investors from the East and West Coast who are just looking to make their money work for them more than in their local markets. They do invest here. Nayia, one question I had. So that example you had, obviously you're giving an example of the best case scenario, but to find a tenant who's going to rent with a buy to own option is kind of unusual. Most tenants are just like, I'll just rent it. How do you find those?
Don't make assumptions.
Gotcha. No, this is great. So, okay. So you have this house, you've agreed on everything. Do you get the tenant? And obviously this is just, there's different, every property is different. But in that example, kind of that hypothetical example, I'm sure you had many like that. Are you getting the tenant before you close? Are you getting it within a month after closing? How hard is it to get those tenants?
So depending on, as soon as I have the house under contract, usually I buy it within a few weeks, right? As soon as I buy it, then I take pictures, and if I need to do any minor work to it, paint, carpet, whatever I'm doing to the property, I will get it ready, for a tenant. And then I will list it. And one of the best marketing places online to list it is on Zillow. Can you imagine? I could list a property, for rent, and I could also list it for rent with an option to buy. And then I can ask anywhere from, let's say, 2 to 5% of the option consideration. Mm-hmm. So imagine, and that's the reason why I said don't make assumptions. Yeah. Don't think that there are not people out there, who want to buy, but maybe they need to season their position or work on their credit a little bit so they could buy in 6 months or a year from now, right? So there are people out there. So in that scenario, if someone brings $10,000 non-refundable for the option to purchase it in the future, in 12 months or 18 months, it's a psychological game also, because these people will feel like this is their home, they will love that. And when they're ready to exercise the option and buy it, that $10,000, deposit that they put will reduce the price by that amount.
Yeah.
Right? So you'll be surprised how many people are willing to do that. Now, do I do that for every property? No. I have a property that I bought 6 years ago that was free and clear. Lawrence, it was free and clear. And the fair market value back then was like $500,000. And I solved the seller's problem. I bought it with 10% down. I bought it for $450,000 and 10% was $45K. And this is the other thing. The sellers agreed to become my bank for the next 10 years at a 0% interest rate. So this property, I did not want to do a lease with an option to buy. I put a regular tenant in there because it's to my advantage to keep that property for 10 years because it's going to be paid off in 3.5 more years.
Yeah, I see.
And I'm going to have $700,000 in one property.
Right. So now, why would he do it? Why would the seller do that at 0%?
Because I didn't bring up interest rates, and they didn't bring up interest rate. Sure. So it comes down to what we negotiate. What terms do we negotiate? Yeah. For the sellers, this property, they were out-of-state sellers. So they lived 6 months in North Carolina and 6 months in Australia. So they had a tenant, and they didn't want to do maintenance stuff. So I asked them, do you need the money now? Are you open to seller financing? They're like, yes. So I brought 10% to the table. Okay. And then I said, what if I make $2,500 monthly payments to you? They said that works because that's what they were getting before in rent. So I'll say, okay, I'll make $2,500 monthly payments to you, and I'm renting it out for $3,400. So I'm cash flowing. But guess what happens every year? The principal balance is reduced by $30,000 because it's a 0% interest rate.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You're paying the loan you're paying the principal down so quickly because you're not having to pay all the interest first like a traditional loan.
So this property is like a golden goose for me. I don't want to sell it, and I don't want to do a lease with an option to buy because I'll make more money by holding on to it.
Right. Well, you brought up a great point that I think a lot of people listening probably don't understand or don't think about is normal people would be like, well, I want 5% interest. And like a lot of wealthy people that have a lot of money, and it sounds like this seller was one of those people. They have multiple homes. They don't have a loan. For them, time and energy is more important than money. And if you can just give them a quick, easy solution and make it make it easy for them, it's one, like you said, one less headache on their plate. They'll do that, and they don't care about, at the time interest rates were probably lower anyway, but they don't care about a few percent interest rates. So that's a great reminder for anyone trying to have creative financing is just because you worry about your pennies, a lot of people that are very wealthy don't. They care more about problems, and they'll pay for you to solve a problem. So I think that's a really great reminder.
Yes, absolutely. And if you don't ask more questions to find out what their need is, you won't know. That's why I tell everybody, don't make assumptions.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. And Nayia, that's not only true in real estate, but that's true in life. I mean, how many people have imposter syndrome? And so imposter syndrome, there's two different types of imposter syndrome. There's the imposter syndrome from somebody who should be an imposter syndrome because they haven't done the work. And there's an imposter syndrome just because maybe you're a bit more introverted and you don't have as long a track record, and you can be very good, but you still have that imposter syndrome until I'll use real estate as an example. You can be really confident when it's a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 sale. But if you get a call and someone's like, hey, can you sell my $5 million house? A lot of newer real estate agents have never seen a number that big. And suddenly they're like, can I do it? Like, I don't feel worthy. Like they get really nervous. But once you've sold multi-million-dollar properties and you get that call, like you've done it before, you just do it again. There's no imposter syndrome. You've done it. So I think that's the limiting beliefs is so important in life, not just in real estate. And I really like what you said about don't make assumptions, because that a lot of that imposter syndrome is you're making assumptions that a transaction is going to be different because it has another zero on the end, but it's not. The same principles apply. You still have to be, you have to do great marketing. You still have to be professional. You still have to be responsive. You still have to know all the details. It's all the same. It's just another zero on the end of it.
It is.
So,
yes. So along these lines, when investors, because that guy used to be buying houses $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 around here, 700. And some other investors, that could scare them, right? Based on your market, okay? And they're going after $100,000, $200,000 properties. At the end of the day, I say, don't be afraid of that number. You just gave the example. With real estate agents selling, $500,000 properties or, $5 million property. And then the imposter syndrome goes away when you realize, as long as you know how to evaluate your numbers, because everything has to do numbers, make sure that you're going to make money on an investment, okay? It's just a numbers game. So let go of that limiting belief, that fear.
I love that. Well, Nayia, we don't have too much longer. Yeah. I do want to, in your bio, you do have something where you said one of your legacy missions is to, educate, equip, empower entrepreneurs and leaders with the right skills and mindset to become wealthy in all aspects of their life. And I love the fact you put that disclaimer, not just wealthy in terms of money, but in all aspects of their life. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yes. So I became a national coach to real estate investors in 2015. And one of the biggest things that I noticed as I was coaching investors was that 80% of my time with them, my coaching had to do more with their personal development than real estate deal structuring. Okay. And I realized that success, that was the determining factor, whether people had success in their lives or not. So I put that statement in there because having my Spartan, background, I realized that people don't have the identity they need to have in order to get their results they want to get. So by focusing on mindset, even language, okay, I did work the last couple of years with a couple of language guys, and there are two different language types. They are, architect language that we're building, things up, or I call it, conflict or destructive demolition language. And that goes with, am I talking to myself in a positive way that's going to empower me? Okay. Am I talking to other people that way? How am I speaking to my kids? Or am I using demolition language where I'm saying, oh, you're stupid. You're an idiot. You don't know how to do this. Real estate is not for you. You don't know how to renovate houses. You know what I'm saying? We can break it down that simply. So by focusing on the individual, okay, and it starts from inside out. And because our thoughts and our words create our stories in our life, right? Our beliefs. Your story is created by how your experiences, right? And can someone reframe that story if they wanted to? Could a challenge in your life? Yes. So can a challenge in someone's life years down the road turn into the biggest blessing they've ever had? Yeah. So by focusing on those points, we can shift our reality. So changing your identity will change the reality, the results that you get. So for me, I believe that heaven on earth is here where we live. We can create it. We are spiritual beings having a human experience.
I love that.
And if we can create heaven here on earth, abundance is ours to create. And why not create it? Starting with ourselves, starting internally. And then, like I said earlier, one of my favorite words is leverage. Okay. I have used real estate as the vehicle to help me out. And earlier on, okay, I was renovating houses, flipping houses, and that was hard work, especially when I had to sign my name on a personal guarantee and I had to pay 10, 12, 15% to a hard money lender. Okay. That's a story for another time. And I had a nightmare deal that went south. But when I learned how to buy houses creatively, I felt like I won the lottery. So I'm like, why not show others how to do this? Okay. But they have to believe in themselves too.
All right,
because you can't do anything. Yeah, you can't do anything if you don't start with you first.
No, I'm so glad. So you saved the best for last because that's really powerful. There's English poet from back in the day, William Blake, from hundreds of years ago, and he has a poem. I don't remember exactly it, but he talks about we can create a heaven or hell in our mind with our mindset, and that's exactly what you're saying, and it's so true. And it's so sad to see right now, recording this end of 2023, how many people are struggling with, mental depression and things like that in the West. But traditionally in the West, we have so much more health and opportunity and money than so many other areas of the world, with billions of people in poverty in these other countries like India. But yet we're struggling with all these mental health issues. And to an extent, they're kind of, we can blame society and the other things, but it's starting from our mind more than our actual physical environment. And I think what you said is just so, so powerful. Why not me? Anyone listening to this that isn't where they want to be in life, they need to ask themselves, why not? There's nothing stopping you. And that's just such a powerful, mindset. And what you said is so interesting because I would never have thought that. I would have thought it would have been more like, maybe 30% of coaching is about personal development. Maybe 70% is about what you're coaching. But it's the other way around. It's the 80-20 rule reversed. that it's 80% was on personal development. That's absolutely fascinating. And that's such a powerful thing to end this with, because I've got a good friend that I work with in real estate. Shout out to my buddy John, who's got all the potential in the world, and he's successful. He's not successful, but we talk a lot about that. He says a lot of negative jokes about himself and kind of self-deprecating jokes. And I'm like, listen, brother, like, words have meaning. We've talked about that many times. And he's like, dude, I'm joking. And it's like, well, you're joking, but there's meaning there. And I do it too. Like I'm 44 and I'm training jiu-jitsu. I'm teaching jiu-jitsu with all these young athletes. And I'll say comments like, man, I'm getting old, and all these negative things. And my instructor, shout out to Jay, he actually said to me the other day, he said, watch what you say. All these, we are getting older, but you're almost just saying it as a justification, like, oh, I'm older, so it doesn't matter anymore. And it's like, well, we still have the freedom of choice. So, that's two examples from myself and from a good friend of mine that we both do what you're saying. So it's something that we really have to work on. So
along those lines, absolutely. Along those lines, our words are powerful. And imagine you're saying this to your subconscious. And by you saying that, I'm getting old, when you say that, it's almost as if you have a level of expectation that your strength might diminish, or things will start getting worse and worse and worse. So for me, when I have friends that say, oh, they're getting old, I'm getting old, I'll tell them, like, you won't catch me say that.
Yeah.
I just turned 46 last week. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm vibrant, I'm healthy. You're teaching jiu-jitsu. I wish you were close by so I could come learn from you. Like, I think we're in our prime.
Yes,
and
I agree.
The wisdom we have now, right? The wisdom we have now is amazing. Look at how many people you are impacting in positive ways through your podcast, through your businesses, right? Through everything that you're doing. So pay attention to the words that come out of your mouth. Make sure that they're positive when you're referring to everything about yourself and everything that you're doing. One of my favorite books is The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. This is based on the Aztec traditions going back thousands of years. The first agreement is be impeccable with your word, because he says our words we can give blessings or curses. We can bless or curse with our words. The second agreement is don't take things personally. Third agreement is don't make assumptions. And the fourth agreement is always do your best. And knowing that your best looks different at 10 o'clock in the morning when you had a good night's rest, and your best looks very differently at the end of, at midnight or after a week of being sick with a cold. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. 100%.
So these are some life principles that are so simple, yet so powerful, that can help us sift our lives completely.
Nayia, that's really beautiful. Well, I'm going to put links to everything that you email me, whatever you want me to put on the show notes. But if there's anything you want to just end with, if people want to learn more about what you do in terms of coaching, being their best self, their personal development, their careers, and everything that you offer, what's the best way they can get in contact with you?
So you can get in contact with me at Nayia, Nayia.us. I have my Value Amplifier.us program, where it's all about bringing value to everyone we serve. And this is how I teach real estate agents and investors how to get that identity of being a value amplifier with the intention to solve problems. And then I teach them how to structure creative deals so they learn how to leverage, right? And I include, all the legal documents that you need to protect yourself. Everything they need from A to Z to be able to do this. And I also have a community called the Grateful Family Partner Community, because I'm on a mission. I want to help create 1,000 multimillionaires, Lawrence. And it just makes me happy, showing others how to create that abundance in all aspects of their lives. And if they want to use real estate as the vehicle to get there, then it would be my honor to help them out.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, listen, I'll put links on the end, and I really appreciate you because you've helped me with some of my personal development. And these are some of the things that maybe I've lost track of a little bit on the way. And I'm a work in progress, just like everyone else. We're always working on ourselves, and it's really good to have people like you to remind me of those things. So you've got the wheels turning a lot. And I love what you said about creative financing, because of all the people that work in real estate that I know, I think I'm one of the more creative people in terms of investing and broking, being a broker. But you take it to a whole nother level. And what you've done is really awesome. You just show me the possibilities of things, because like I always tell people, when I'm a broker selling something with an owner who's open to owner financing, people will call me and say, hey, what are his terms? And I said, well, real estate is all negotiable. What are you offering? And I'm aware of it, but not to the extent of the things that you've told me today. So I really appreciate you sharing that wisdom, and also your great energy too.
Oh, thank you. I'm here. And by the way, feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to help you any way I can. So if you come across a creative deal, just let me know. Hey, Nayia, what do you think about this? I would enjoy helping you out. And who knows, I would like to buy some houses out there in Chicago. We're going to invest together.
I'm always here for you. Exactly. Well, listen, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was fun.